we would have tons of people bring resumes, and I had my own coding system for it. So when the newspaper wanted to look at, they want access to everything, and I said, what is this for coding? Because you have to have a system.
Absolutely.
Well, we are rolling on the camera, so thanks for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So the format is I think as I explained, we ask questions, give each of you the chance to answer, and then if there's anything else you'd like to add after hearing your opponent, that is fine to do, but generally we just don't do like a debate. It's just a run through and listen to what you have to say.
We should have had coffee in the Sun River.
Yeah. We could have done this over there.
Yeah. Probably would have had better coffee than here.
We try to keep your comments to 2 minutes, and like you said, it's not a debate format. It's just really for us to learn more about how you feel on the issues, and we'll go from there. Maybe we'll start with you, and if you can, just give us quick why you decided to run and why you're interested in the school board.
Okay, and do you want me to give you any of my background in this talk?
Yeah, that's great.
I'm a retired school teacher administrator from Fresno Unified School District. I retired back in the late 90s. I started out as an elementary teacher, was a middle school and high school counselor, and then became a alternative high school principal. And then retired from that. Did some things for Fresno County on extra contracts after that. My education was interrupted when I was drafted in the United States Army, served a couple of years in Germany, got out, and then went into the Coast, got an honorable discharge, and got out and served in the Coast Guard Reserve for a couple of years and got an honorable discharge. We moved around a lot. My wife is also a retired principal and a school board member. Fast forward to our last venue before here was Antioch, California. In 2010, I ran for the Antioch Contra Costa County, not Antioch, Contra Costa County Board of Education. Over 1 million residents, 178,000 students, 18 school districts. We oversaw all of them. We looked at their budgets, we made visitations, we made sure the reserves were correct. Then when I got off that after 4 years, and I served 1 year as president, a very successful charter school, Clayton Valley Charter High School in Concord, California, wanted me on their board, and I accepted. I still am a member. Charter law allows you to live in Timbuktu and still be on their board. I go once a month. They fly me down for board meetings. 2,200 students, very highly successful high school. And then we moved here. We've been in and out of Oregon for the last 15 years. We had a vacation home, and we finally decided to move here full-time almost 2 years ago. Always had a passion for kids and for parents' choice, and I decided to run for the school board. Not that I had anything against my opponent. In fact, we seem to, from what I've read about his comments, we seem to see pretty eye to eye on a lot of things. I just felt that a lot of these board positions hadn't been challenged, and I wanted to put my hat in the ring. I'm not running against my opponent, I'm running for the position. I have a lot of other things. I've been I'm a CASA volunteer, or was a CASA volunteer, which my opponent is very well informed about. I've been a domestic violence counselor. I've been a big brother. I've been to 4 California School Board Association conferences. I've been to a national school board conference in Florida 2 years ago. I've been to 2 model school conferences. So I'm very well connected with the legislative process. Been to Sacramento a number of times. I better end it there, or Dr. Young won't have any time.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Richard, first of all, I'm glad you're running for a couple of reasons, because it's helped me consolidate some thoughts, and I mean that. I said the other day to a group that it's really not about us, it's about kids and learning. And I know that's what you've been about, and I am too. And I have from my whole life. I think starting as a parent, teacher, school administrator, and superintendent for 20 plus years. The reason I'm running, I'll go backwards a little bit, because a little over 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I have 3 grown kids, and one at 3.5 plus years ago, one family lived in Beijing, one lived in Tokyo, and one lived in Portland. And then they all consolidated to Portland, which means we have 8 grandchildren up there. So a little over 2 years ago, I was up watching a grandson play soccer, and my phone rang. And the person on the other line said, Dr. Young, we'd like to talk to you. We'd like to have you talk to some people about the Ben Lapine School Board. And I honestly thought it was a prank call. I thought, are you kidding me? This school board, that's the last thing I thought I would want to be involved in. Having been retired, but having made a very, very good living, and I think contribution to education with good school board members. And so I got to thinking, really? And so anyway, I came down, walked into a room like this, except we had the other newspaper, we had the unions, we had everybody, and they had prescribed questions. And they said, why do you want to run for the school board? Why do you want to be on the school board? And I said, I'm not sure I want to be on the school board, honestly. I said, why do you want me to be on the school board? And they were kind of startled by that. And I said, you need to understand that I will see the world quite differently from a lot of people. It's because of where I've been, where I've lived, the kind of schools I've directed, and I'm really not sure you want that. But then a couple of things happened that surprised me. One, I found out that about 3 days after the appointment, at the first school board meeting I would attend, the then superintendent, Ron Wilkinson, was going to announce his retirement. And I thought, wait a minute, if you have a chance to sit at the table with folks that are going to select the educational leader for the Ben Lapine school system, and in some ways the educational leader for this side of the mountains, I thought, when I retired from international schools, I actually did director or superintendent searches for schools all over the world. And I thought, well, maybe I can bring something to that process. So I thought, pay attention, to what's going on. And so I did finish the interview. I did get appointed, and I was able to sit at the table, and I am delighted that we were able to find Shay. Now, having said that, you need to know that was a very full country search as well as a worldwide search. And I believe that we made a great decision because we didn't go backwards, and we found someone who is energetic and actually believes that every child matters.
Stuart, let me ask you, why do you want to continue to serve?
Well, that's what I'm getting to right
Okay.
now, because the next component with these 6 strangers in the room, which were the other school board members, which I didn't know at that time, they then decided with Shay to step back and have a working retreat to develop strategies for where we're headed. And I thought, to have an opportunity to look at learning, taking the international aspects that I had and try to bring the good components of some of that to Ben. And I have I just want to look at one sheet, and this will answer your question. I probably won't be able to find it right off, but the district put together 8, you'd call them goals or ends. If you listen to a couple of lines in it, Ben Lapine School students use of the essential 21st century skills of critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration. And what I'm proud of with that is we established a direction to not just take a traditional sense of how children learn, but say, what are the skills that are needed for the future? I used to address our organizations in our schools by saying, look, think about this with a kindergarten child. When they start kindergarten at 5, what is the world going to look like by the time they graduate from high school in 12 years? You tell me what the world will look like 12 years ahead. And so
Stuart, I'm going to have to stop you there.
Okay.
We're going to get to some of the...
All right, but I'll just finish with this one comment, that when we started looking at future skills, that got my attention. I think we made progress, and I want to continue that.
Great.
Okay. Well, obviously there's a lot of ground to cover here. I'm curious, just looking at both of you and knowing that you have already lots of experience in schools, what particular skill sets you feel will serve this growing district, this district that is facing large issues just related to an influx of people? And I'll start with you again.
Well, first of all, Dr. Young hit on a point that probably one of the most important things that a school board member does is select a leader.
Yeah.
A superintendent is the essence of the success of a school district. Once that superintendent has been selected, then the board needs to step back. They make policies, but they don't micromanage. The superintendent and his staff runs the district. I'm concerned about the 70% graduation rate in this area. It's abysmal. It's one of the worst in the nation. What can we do to solve that? Statistics show that student engagement is highly necessary, whether it be club, band, music, art, sports. Students need to feel connected to the schools. In California, at my charter school, we have a project where from 9th to 12th grade, if any student has a combination of 4 Fs or 4 Ds, 3 Fs, 1 D, all Ds, there's immediate selection of that student to a small committee, an administrator, a teacher, a counselor. What's the basis of the student's failure? Because especially in the 9th grade, that student's going to drop out of school unless there's solid intervention. You want me to go on, or?
Is this getting to the growing population question? Is that where this is headed?
The growing population of this.
Yeah, I hear you talking about graduation rates. I'm curious about this problem of this dilemma that we have of.
Well, yeah, we have 18,000 students. We have 80,000 plus citizens. Interestingly enough, only about 25% of those citizens are connected to the schools. Mm-hmm. Most are grandparents or they're citizens from other states, and so how do you get them to say it's important, for instance, for this bond to pass? Because that's going to add money to their tax base. They have to understand we're investing in the future citizens of this country. The strength of this country lies in the education of its upcoming citizens, mm-hmm. plus civility, how to know other peoples from other areas. We've got 20 different languages in this district. We have 40-something% kids on free lunch programs. You know, there's a lot to be attended to. The buses, we need to get rid of the diesel buses because the fumes are endangering kids, and I think there's an effort to do that. There was a settlement from Volkswagen, and we're getting some money for that, mm-hmm. To get rid of diesel and more clean burning fuels. I could go on and on.
Stuart, what would you say about what skill set are you bringing to?
Well, I want to finish one thing Richard started that had to do with the kids being engaged, and I think I bring this as in some ways I'm a nightmare for the superintendent because I've been there for 20 years, understand that job as well as him, if not better, and I won't let go that every child's important and every child needs to be connected with. Research shows that if a child in middle school or high school is connected with one adult or has one interest in the school, the potential of getting into to graduating goes into the 90th percentile. And that's what Richard was getting to. I just got something on my phone, in fact, about Three Rivers that had to do, that it shows that right now in activities, a year ago, 20% of those children were involved in activities and clubs and things like that. This year, it's 90%. And that's a credit to Tim, the principal over there, and what's going on. I will continually push that we do our best to look at every child's learning possibility as an individual. Kids learn differently, they have to be engaged. And I've been at that my whole life. Last comment on it is that I would get our community together, 48 nationalities in the international schools. I would sit them down and I would say, listen, to the parents, I would say, what skills do you want your children to have when they leave school? What skills do you want? And what kind of people do you want them to be? I think that is critical in today's world. And I desperately believe that. We have to get kids that are not focused on I or me, but we.
Okay. Did you have one that you wanted to go with?
Sure. I'll start with you, Stuart, because we're picking on Richard over there every time.
No.
Yeah.
Pick.
Yeah, both of us have a lot of years you can pick up. Yeah.
What role do you think, I mean, there's federal law regarding religion in schools, but what role do you feel like religion should play at the Bennell Pines School District level?
Do you realize what you're asking me?
I hope so.
Let me go at it this way.
Sure.
All right, and I'll try to be brief, but you got to understand this. My dad was a Baptist minister. I went to Linfield College, Baptist. I left Linfield playing baseball, won a national championship, to go to Berkeley, California in the late 60s. You know what was going on in Berkeley in the late 60s. We had 100,000 people protesting the Vietnam War outside our window. I was in seminary at the time studying for the ministry. I left Berkeley after a couple of years, which I won't go into now, and went to Pakistan. I stepped off a plane as a young kid to have 35 high school kids as my wife
So
and
you
my
didn't
family.
finish at Berkeley, you dropped out and went to Pakistan.
I finished about a year and a half of Masters of Divinity,
Okay.
and then I went to Cal State Hayward to get a Master's in Counseling. Didn't finish those 2 degrees. I got my Master's and Doctorate at the University of Oregon later. But I left Berkeley to go to Pakistan. Now, if you can get a bigger dichotomy between McMinnville and Berkeley, and then Lahore, Pakistan, I'm not sure where. But I say that because I then lived in a Muslim country for 5.5 years, both Pakistan and then Bangladesh. Then I went to Japan, 14 years. It's a Buddhist country. Lived and traveled in India. And so my answer to the religion question, it's funny, when the moral majority, conservative right, challenged a book in our library, I was superintendent in schools in Cresswell, outside of Eugene, for 3 years. And when they challenged the book, it was called Values Clarification. I was asked to speak about pressure groups and all of that, and it all tied into the fact that I desperately believe children need to have the broadest sense of knowledge they can get on any topic. Proselytizing religion is wrong in schools. I had challenges with groups that wanted to have things in our schools, and I never minded it. I think kids need healthy choices. But I have said to more than one group, I will respect your belief. I will respect your right to religion, but don't try to impose that on me. And I look at the world very collectively in terms of beliefs. I think schools need to embrace knowledge. I think we should have Skype programs with people in all cultures so that we understand not just, no offense, not just what the news media says, but so they actually get to know human beings.
We're in the news media, we support that.
I know. I know you are, but
Richard?
Aaron,
Yeah.
my answer is bold and brief. There is no room in public schools for religion, period. Parents have a choice. If parents want to send their kids to a private school that endorses their religious belief, so be it. If they want to homeschool them because of that, fine. When I was on the county board in California, we've had a couple of groups come with petitions to set up schools based on a religion. And as long as their petition was strong, well-written, and all the 9 factors were there, we said, go for it. We'll oversight you, but you have a right. Not in our school. No political ideology should be espoused by any teachers in the classroom. I don't think they have a right to have a captive audience of kids and do that, but my answer for religion stands.
Mm-hmm. So what would you support, like a high school course that was covering world religions, for example?
Well, yes, that's okay, because all sides,
Okay,
That's
I
what I'm
just want
saying
to
too, the
clarify
same
that.
thing.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
He touched, Dr. Young touched on something about multicultural. I'm Armenian, I'm first generation. We're a Christian nation surrounded by Muslim nations. Here in Bend, I have a very close friend who's Kurdish, worked for the State Department. He's in Turkey right now, goes 3 times a year. He has a 12-year-old son in Istanbul who he wants to bring here and put in our schools, and he asked me, Richard, what do you think the faculty and kids are going to think about a Muslim child who speaks broken English? I said, I feel Bend is all-inclusive. I think Bend is humane. I don't think there'll be a problem. I don't think there'll be bullying. And so there's a 99% chance when he comes back in June he's going to bring his 12-year-old son and enroll him.
That brings me to think about just instances of alleged bullying in the schools here, especially post-election. So were there to be instances of, whether you want to call them hate crimes, bullying based on religion or nationality, how would you as a school board person handle that?
Well, as a school board member, I don't handle it.
Okay,
That has to start, first of all, at the school, at the ground level in the school.
right.
That parent, in fact, my grandson, who's 13 right now, is in Visalia, California, has been bullied in a PE class. That was reported to the teacher and the principal. My daughter went to the school, filed a complaint and said, you settle it or I'm going to file an assault charge with the police department. It needs to be settled at ground level. Now, if we as board members find out it is not, for instance, sexual assault by a teacher not being reported by the principal, then we need to do some hardline looking at that. But we don't go onto the campus and say, oh, I heard this child was bullied, you need to do something about it. That's not our purview. But it's important. Just like teachers need to be aware of the huge growth in suicides amongst kids. Teachers need to be trained. We don't go on the school campus and say, oh, have you done your once a year workshop on this?
Okay.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that, because I completely agree, you're a school board member, you set policy, you hire a superintendent, you hold him or her to the highest standard in every way, and that's critical. I was at the Oregon School Boards Association in Portland post-election, and sat next to a school board member from Forest Grove, and she was talking to me about the middle school children, you know, arriving in tears because they had to bring suitcases because they were afraid they wouldn't see their parents when they got home. These were Hispanic kids. I have worked with a group, the Latino community here. They just had a session up at Bear Creek. There's some folks that were way too nervous to go to the public meeting because they have concerns.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say on camera how angry that makes me feel. And I think what we can do as a board member is we can, in the superintendent's cabinet, which is usually 2 board members or 3 board members with the superintendent leadership team, say not only what is our policy, but how can we do better? And I force that kind of question, and I'm glad you raised it the way you did, because it is, I've seen some awful things around the world, and we have no place for it. I'm proud that Richard has invited his friend to have, because I think he will do well here. It's darn good, but this is not a perfect world. And I sat with the, what's his name, sheriff down in Sun River, the police chief in Sun River.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he comes to...
yeah, I had coffee with him, and I was asking, is there an uptick in Hispanic incidents in South County and things like this? And I was very encouraged by the information. There didn't seem to be. But I'm not misled. I have talked to folks that shop at funny times at night so they don't get people saying things to them. And that's really sad.
Okay. Let's see. Where do I want to go next? Well, you know, we've had an unfortunate incident of a school roof collapse in our district. So naturally that has us thinking about facilities and management, and what role do you see the board playing in safety and facilities management in light of that incident? And I can start with you.
Pass the bond. We've got to improve the facilities in some ways. We can't afford, I've only been on the board 2 years. We need to not play catch up. So that's number one. But I told you earlier that I will look at things differently for different kinds of reasons. And about 12, 13, 14 years ago, I was heading the shelters for the Red Cross during fire season. And so we were doing all kinds of things. There was actually a fire down in the Pines, set up a shelter in the middle school, and did all of that. But the Red Cross sent me to Texas to a conference with FEMA, with some of the key FEMA people, to look at catastrophic events and some of those kinds of things. The reason they sent me was because I lived in Kobe, Japan in 1996. And you all would know that at 5:32 in the morning, a massive earthquake hit. We lost 180,000 buildings in 32 seconds. 5,200 people died. I brought a show and tell. I'll show you, it is just, now, I say that because one of the things that I realized when I was inside the event over in Japan, and we lost bridges on both sides of the island where the new school was built, and we had 562 people sleep at the school for a week. Try feeding them, you know, and how are you going to do it? One of the things I realized that inside events, things change like that. If you now fast forward to today and to this event, and you have social media, you have instant messages, you have everybody with an opinion, what you say at 5:30 or 6:30 or 7:30 in the morning is accurate, but it may not be accurate at 9:30. And so you have to be careful that way. I think the school district did a terrific job during that snow. I think that we, again, have the policies in place to be extremely proactive at looking at things the best we can ahead in the future. But it was drilled into me with the FEMA folks and from my own experience that no two events are the same. I do not care how you plan for them. Certainly we need to look at structures all the time, and I go with the comment on buses and a whole variety of things. But we have to be proactive. But I think in hindsight, with this particular event, I think you have to be very cautious about, you're not trying to hide information. The information changes that quickly. And I think you have to be very, very careful about how you communicate and when you communicate. And I've spoken directly with Shay about that.
Richard, do you share the feeling that the district did a good job of communicating during the snowstorm this winter?
I'm sorry, did they do a good job of what?
Communicating to the district.
Does the school district do a good job of communicating?
Did they do a good job during this last winter?
When that roof collapsed?
Yep.
I do. I absolutely feel that they did everything that was possible to let the public, particularly the parents, know. If I could expand on this, the bond isn't just what's needed the next 10 years. When I was in front of the Bulletin editorial board, I said, you know, it involves safety. Well, no, the bond's not for safety. I said, wait a minute. You've got school facilities that need, for instance, a kid's walking down the corridor and there's a hole in the corridor because the cement is worn away and he trips. That's safety. You've got kids playing soccer out in the field and there's squirrel holes, a chance for a broken leg. That's safety. So maintenance, we need a new high school, we need a new elementary school. Sure, teachers could teach in a janitor's closet if it's a good enough teacher, but that's not what you do with a professional person. Globally, I think, and I have to plead ignorance, I know Sherry Hill's been very active at the state level. I think because we gulp so much of the state budget for education, we need to constantly be at the doorstep of the legislative people, and I did that when I was in Sacramento, to keep them aware that funds need to be a priority, that districts need their money. The May revise is really difficult when you're on this, whether you're a superintendent or a school board or you're a principal. That's really late to be able to say, oh gee, I've got to hire 3 more teachers, or I've got to let a teacher go, or I need more money for supplies. We're the second largest employer in Deschutes County. 1,800 plus employees, millions of dollars of a budget. We're the 5th largest district in the state. We need to know in advance. I mean, just like here at the source, you got to sell ads. You got to know what's going to back the publication of my paper. You can't wait until Thursday when your paper's coming out Friday saying, oh yeah, I can afford to run it off the press now.
Right. Well, I was going to talk to you about the ads later, but it wasn't.
Can I pick up on that?
Sure, absolutely.
Because Richard gets into something I couldn't agree more on. I mean, the timing is just ludicrous.
Why can't we both be elected at this?
Share this. No, the thing that's difficult with it is, you have to keep in mind, I was a superintendent in the state, at the time I believe the youngest superintendent in the state, when we actually had money. We actually had money. We actually could fund it. I think at the time, and this I could be off on, but I think we were between 8th and 10th in the nation in teacher salaries. I left and I was proud of what it is. Until the state of Oregon says education is our #1 priority and begins to look at funding it that way, we're in trouble. And we've got massive collisions right now. And if we can talk about PERS, we can talk about the formula for budgeting, the current deficit projection, and that kind of thing. And that is, I will leave here and go to a budget committee meeting. And we have to look at some really, we think it could be really tough, but we don't know. We don't have that. We don't have that right now. So I'm just.
What do you think the state's prioritizing ahead of schools right now?
I'm not sure what they're prioritizing ahead of schools. I think what they haven't said is they have an obligation to fund schools,
Right.
and they're not doing it. And there's actually, I believe, a constitutional amendment says they have to, but they can write 3 lines or something that said, "Oh, we will."
Yeah.
Or something like that. And that's what I mean by the obligation. They're just moving it down, and we're in debt.
So it sounds like, Richard, you desire to be an advocate in Salem for our board or for our school district. Do you agree? Would that be something that you feel is your
Well, I
role?
appreciated, Richard, what you said about Sherry, because she is very connected to that. Sherry Health is very connected, and I give her the highest of marks for doing that and all of that. I couldn't agree more. We have to advocate. I actually went over last year with a few board members to meet with a few key board members from a few other large districts to say, we've got to figure it out differently, because we can't depend on the legislature. It's been 40 years since it's eroded, and we've got to stop it. We don't have the right formula, but I do believe there's got to become a partnership with large corporations, with schools, with involving community and businesses in a way that we don't have a model for right now.
When you say large corporations, do you mean taxation of large corporations, or?
No, I mean, we've got to have everybody at the table. We need to have a dialogue that both says to them, are the skills these kids coming out with the skills that you're interested in? And then we've got to say, if you're going to get the best folks to come into this state in different ways, we've got to have the best education system. And you've got to help us figure out a formula for that.
Well, one of the things at the state level is obviously the impact of PERS on the budget. And I'm sure in your budget meeting, the 4 letters will come up repeatedly when you talk about it. Richard, let me start with you. And coming from California to this crazy state, how do you navigate around something like PERS and find a way to prioritize schools?
Well, it's a mandate that has to be funded, because you've promised your employees that there's certain benefits that they're going to get, and there's no around it. Unfortunately, I think, what are we, about $1.4 billion right now in the hole?
1.6.
Pardon?
1.6.
1.6.
Possibly.
Okay. And we're not the only state facing that. You know, as you said, California is hugely in the hole. Where does the money come from? Right now, there's a piece of legislation that is going to go before the voters, I hope, which will prioritize that education will get the first funding out of Salem, because it's the biggest part of the budget. And I wrote a letter to and it was published in the Bulletin recently, because the editorial at the Bulletin had said, why should schools get their money first? What about these others? And I said, because it's about kids. That's the most important ingredient in what we're all about. That's why schools need to get the money first. Schools need to plan. Schools just can't work off the hip. Another thing, Salem doesn't put money away or give districts money for facilities. That's why we're doing this. Please pass the bond.
Right.
We have no other way.
Great. Stuart, you want to speak to that, PERS and priorities? Do you feel that the same way that Richard does, that PERS is an obligation?
Oh, it by law it is. That's a no-brainer. The problem is the PERS debt is much bigger than the shortfall for this year. It's massive in this state. I've heard a couple of figures that are awful. What I can't accept is that we do not have legislators that will sit down in the room together and try to have a dialogue about a solution to it. And if it comes out in the form of different kind of mandates, dealing with corporations, dealing with individuals, they've got to deal with that. Otherwise, and I go with what Richard is saying, to me, what matters is, as a person that's been involved with kids my whole life, is that they come first, schools come first. And we are not prioritizing that in this state.
When the state came out, or not the state, but when it was on the ballot this year, Measure 97, and it came in front of our school board voted, made a pronouncement against. How'd you guys come to make that decision? You were the first out. I think you were the only. And you were part of that decision. What drove that?
Can't tell you. No. It's a great question. I struggled with that a great deal, and I in fact said at the meeting that in principle I don't believe school boards should take a position on legislative issues like that. But I also believe I am very, very disappointed and tired of poorly written legislation. And I believe that the way that was written, everybody would have loved $1.3 billion to come in if it had gone to education. And everybody agreed with me on that, on that point. We all wanted it. But the state has...
Well, everybody says they want it.
Yeah, I think you're right. But the state has a history of it not going to where they say it's going to. Sure. And that's the way that bill was written. I talked to people who were writing it. I talked to Sherry a great deal about who went over and detailed some of that. In my opinion, that bill long-term would have been terrible for the state of Oregon. And I in fact said to the union groups when I chatted with them, I said, listen, if that had been written in a different way, I would have gone door to door for that bill. I would in a heartbeat, I would have gone door to door. But I am tired at the state level. I won't even get started at the national level of poorly written legislation that harms, in a way that will harm kids because of jobs, long-term, or healthcare, or a whole bunch of other things.
Richard, you want to speak to it? How long, Richard, can I ask real quick?
Yes.
How long have you lived in the area? I don't want to put on questions on you.
Full-time 2 years, had a home for 14, 15, so.
Well, actually, we lived in Metolius for a year. We lived in Klamath Falls for 2 years. We lived in Bend in the early 2000s when my wife retired in 2001. We bought a house downtown here and lived for 3 years. But then we moved from there to Arizona for a couple of years. So conglomerately, for the last 15 years, we've been in and out of Oregon. We've had rental homes, vacation home, but this latest move was this October 1st to be 2 years in Water Wonderland 2. And hopefully this is it. I'm getting too old to be a gypsy.
Yeah. So Measure 97, you remember when it came through last election?
Oh yeah, I wrote a letter to the Bulletin, another one of my infamous letters. I support it, My only reticence was I wasn't quite sure if it passed where the money was going to go.
Right.
Was it going to go salaries? Was it going to go maintenance? Was it going to go to
PERS. PERS.
Birds.
Yes, I was going to say
It would
PERS.
have gone to PERS.
See, and I, if I may, I have almost tears for Salem because there's no new money coming in. They've got to cut. I mean, they've squeezed everything out of the rock they can. So where are the new monies going to come in? If I go over there and meet with a legislator or Governor Brown, I would love that. They would shrug their shoulder and say, okay, tell me, where's the new income coming from?
Right, right. Yeah, that's,
We're squeezing all the taxes we can.
yeah.
So I have another sort of ideological question. We did a story earlier in the fall, just talking about contraception not being offered at the neighborhood health or the school health-based health center at Bend High. We found it ironic, perhaps, that there at the same school there was a daycare center for teen parents, but not a contraception option. And we were told this is a school board decision. And so I'm curious what your thoughts on that are, if you've been part of that decision making, or if you would support offering contraception options at school health centers.
That was not part of the decision.
Okay.
I don't know the policy on it, and I will have to look at it.
Mhm.
I really am not familiar enough with what the current policy or practice is to give you a good answer.
Okay. Ideologically, would you support it?
Yeah, I think kids need to have it.
Okay.
Richard?
Well, just the mere fact that it's in a child care center tells you contraception probably should have been used when we got 15, 16-year-old kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I've dealt with that on my, when I was principal of an alternative high school. You know, we had daycare, we had girls and boys bringing their kids to school while they attended. There's kind of a thin line. I respect the home's authority, but there also is such a thing as in loco parentis. When that kid leaves that home, we are the parents, legally. Now, does that mean, well, we should offer contraception? Personally, I say yes, because I see the, although it's diminishing somewhat, the unwanted pregnancies in teenagers, is still out there. Parents can bury their head in the sand, but it's out there. Now, a lot of parents just do not feel comfortable talking to their kids about birth control,
Right.
but it needs to be. When you look at the stats, girls who have children at a young age tend not to graduate, tend not to be able to get a competitive job, can't get a job, have to go on the public dole, are more abused. So that's my answer, I think.
The only thing I have to add with it, when I gave the answer earlier about knowledge and religion, that applies across it to sex education, it applies to the environment. We have to, kids can get any information they want on their phones.
Right.
And so if we're not providing them information on all sides, it's just that we have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna need one of you to disagree with the other one on
Yeah.
one of these questions we're gonna ask.
I have a question.
Fire.
I'm not gonna put you in.
No. There is,
Do you have a question?
there is another line that's hard to cross in that you've got children in Bend High School that are from Catholic families. So
What did you say? What word?
From Catholic.
Oh, Catholic.
Catholic families, and so you're walking on thin ice there also.
Yeah.
Talk about religion in the school, and let's say a Catholic parent says, hey, wait a minute, contraception, you know, that goes against our religion. it's touchy. I don't know the policy, I'll be honest with you. I don't know the full policy.
Well, that is the policy.
It is our understanding that each individual school districts in the state has the
Option.
right, the option to offer it or not, and it's a school board decision, is what we were told.
Okay,
So,
that'd be something you can look up and call me.
Like I
We'll
said,
follow up. We'll follow up with
copy.
whichever one of you wins the show, because we feel that's misplaced as well. So
Okay, so it seems as though both of you are supportive of the bond measure passing, and you can correct me if that's wrong. We just went and got familiar with it and asked some questions earlier today. And as our understanding is, there's a couple provisions in the bond. So one is improving or building new facilities, the elementary school and the high school. Another one is to upgrade existing facilities, improve technological advances in the schools, and improve safety measures. Those are kind of the four that they talk about. Is there a weakness, or what would be a weakness, one weakness that you would pinpoint in the bond measure that they've outlined that might jeopardize it from being passed potentially? And what would you want to improve on in the measure?
A weakness in the bond
Mm-hmm.
and how the money is going to be spent?
Mm-hmm.
is there a weakness in how? What, if
I
so,
don't
what would
see,
you-
I don't see one, but,
If you were to say there was a weakness.
pardon me?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. If there was a weakness, what is the weakness? I mean, there has to be something that's.
Probably not enough money. I think that the district is, and I know they hired a professional to look at what is the possibility that the bond be passed, and at what level can we reach that bond limit. I think because it's going to have, as I said earlier, an effect on the tax rate, I think that was a limit. If it were up to me, I probably would have asked for maybe 290, 310, because I don't know that we're going to be able to do, we being the school district, I don't know if we're going to be able to do everything with that amount of money. I really
That's a good
don't.
point.
If it was, would you take that risk?
Pardon me?
Would you take that risk? Would you increase it?
Would you have taken that?
Oh, would I
would you,
have?
Yeah, would you?
If I was on the board,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I would have said, oh, 268, 268. I would have said, let's go 299. There's something magical when you go into a store and it says $30, but if it says $29.95, you're more tempted to that. But I would have to look to see what the rate would have been per thousand on the tax,
Right.
you know. If it was exorbitant, I would have said no. You've got to realize a lot of people here have second homes in other states. They're paying taxes there too. To me and my wife, I'm not bragging, but we could afford, you know, because I know we're investing in something that I believe, being a military person, ex-military, I believe in the strength of our country, as I said, having a strong citizenship coming on, and they come out of our schools. So yes, we need those bonds passed. We need the facilities, etc.
Stuart?
Yeah, I have to, I chuckle a little bit, and we'll get exactly to your question about the weakness. But when I was a rookie superintendent in Crestwell, I needed to get a bond levy. And I had no clue. The formula, how to do it, anything, and I called a superintendent who was getting close to retirement over in Bethel. And I said, Ray, I said, give me some advice. And he said to me, what's your basketball team ranked? And I said, well, preseason polls are ranked second. He said, oh, I'll go for 14%. Nobody understands the bond or cares very much about it. They care about what happens Friday night with your basketball team. They had all of that. But the question is, it is a dilemma. I respect what Richard said in terms of boosting it up, because we can't afford to be behind. I believe, and I've looked at the material, that they maxed out what we can accomplish and what we we need to do with the projections for growth over the next decade.
Yeah, but
It-
but
it-
we can get to those projections in a second.
Yeah.
question. They're
Well, which is,
extremely low, I think. So.
we'll get to that, and we can, but I believe we can. The part that I'm encouraged about, and I was a little skeptical of this last year, we did an audit this year on a couple of the new projects that we had. And it was independent out of Portland. They had audited some big entities up there. And they came in, and I was very impressed with what they gave us and showed us in terms of how well we used the money, how efficiently it was used. I was a little skeptical in the beginning, and it wasn't perfect. There's a list of some things, but that money was well monitored, and it was not wasted. There's an audit built into this bond, and that's critical. And if that weren't built in there, I would say that's a weakness, but it is. I have been through so many, I've heard the information on the bond so many times. It is well put together, well thought out. I'm highly encouraged because I believe it will give us the improvements we need to make, and it will get us on the right path for new schools.
So what's the weakness?
I don't think there's a glaring weakness in it. I really don't. Again, I was part of the discussion putting it together, so I went over it quite a bit. And so I don't want to tell you what mistakes I made.
So all of those
but,
things
you know.
that are listed, it's not far-fetched to achieve all those things with the...
No. No.
Okay.
Early on in the 2002-3, I forget when it was, I was selected to the Citizens Advisory Committee, to the board. In fact, a meeting you're going to, I think they're going to be presenting, aren't they?
Yes.
The budget.
Part of it.
And I was on that committee, and I really felt that the board did their due diligence in listening to us, discussing the budget and the goals and priorities. And then I worked on the bond issue at that time. I remember being on some room somewhere with the phone banks, and I was making phone calls, and I was heartened by the positive responses on the other end of the phone. There were fewer hang-ups than I thought, and more positive, yeah, we need this, thank you for calling. I was asked to run for the school board by 2 board members at that time, but we were leaving the area. But I feel the board is pretty conservative and really puts its head to the ground to hear the rivulets of what's happening and what people need. So I don't think a weakness other than the money is, I don't think there's a weakness.
Okay. Our time is almost up. I'd like to offer you both the opportunity to tell us something that we may have missed. Obviously, an hour's not enough. And Stuart, we started with Richard. Why don't we conclude with your comments?
I'm just delighted to have this chance to chat with Richard, and we will get together and visit some more, and regardless. The thing for me that's been a surprise, and that I'd share is I didn't think in living, we had a home in Sun River, and now we live right across from Crosswater, right on the river there, and I didn't think I would get as involved in South County as I have. From setting up a shelter for a fire at the middle school, at 3 in the morning, if you're waking people up who are sleeping on cots, you get to know a community differently. My wife and I build with the habitat projects down there in La Pine. She's very involved in it's called the Care and Share Food Program that they do over at the business park. We service about 20 or 30 families a month with food. And I happen to chair the Tri-County CASA Board. We have more foster care children in homes. We had more in South County than in any other area. None of that matters as much as I do have a deep understanding of what those children come to school with because of the poverty level, because of the struggles they have, because of some of the social and emotional issues that they're facing. Sit down with single parents who have no time and with their kids. And that's why I go back to Three Rivers, where I was talking about earlier, where, you know, now we have 90% of those kids engaged in an activity. We didn't have that before. And that's why I'm excited. I feel I can continue to contribute to move those things in the right direction. And if I didn't, I'd get off. So that's the only thing I would bring up. And I know Richard could bring a host of good stuff to the same thing. In fact, he can, if I'm on, he's my coach. If he's on, I'll bug you about stuff. Yeah, whatever.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you. You touched upon something that's hit a raw nerve. I don't think the public realizes how many homeless kids we have living in buses, motels, etc. And there are millions of single mothers in this nation that are trying to raise kids and keep a job. Foster kids, when I was with CASA, that was one of the prime things. Do you all know what CASA is? That was one of the prime things that we did. We were assigned cases of kids who had been taken away from parents because of violence, drugs, and so on. There's a side of our student population that the average citizen never sees and never knows. And it's sad, but it's there. I mentioned, I think in our district it's like 43% around free lunch program. What does that tell you? So the underserved, the minority, the special ed, the homeless, the foster, I mean, the school district has a basket overflowing with things that need to be addressed. Let me just sum up. You were saying, well, you guys ought to disagree on something. When I was at the Bend editorial board and Dr. Young had been there, at the conclusion, one of the people said, you guys are so alike. It's like a toss-up. And I said, well, toss the coin to me. They endorsed you, but in the endorsement, they were kind to me. So it seems like we both are running on the same track. And I know it's going to be a problem for you folks because we're both great people.
Well, it's a good problem to have. Hey.
I just want to pick up on one thing because you hit a nerve also with what's happening to kids in this. And this happened to me yesterday talking to our executive director at CASA. You have to realize we will approach 600 kids in the Tri-County area this year that will need to be in foster care. Mm-hmm. That is a massive number. Yeah. And it's sad. And I don't think people understand the depth of that problem and what we have to do with. And I should think.
I mean, I could go on and on about this, but do you find it ironic that we have a high number of really beautiful homes and people obviously in affluent communities? We have a very affluent community, and then yet such a need. I mean, this is just, I guess, this is a statement really. Compared to other cities of our size, it's, you know, it's an interesting dichotomy.
I was struggling yesterday with how we can get agencies to work better together, more efficiently, to deal with some of those issues. Mm-hmm. And that was on the CASA side, not the school board. But it's interrelated. Mm-hmm. These kids come to school. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's great. It's been a real treat to sit with you both, and my hat's off to you for running, and you for running again and serving. And I thank you both for for your work and
Thanks,
your
Aaron,
efforts
thank
and
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
taking the time to.
Are we
Thanks.
still on camera?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you like me to get you off?
Turn it off and then
Goodbye.
we'll.
You know,
Thank